After 1,185 days, Satoru Gojo has finally been unsealed. A major fight is starting between Gojo, Sukuna, and Kenjaku, and Gojo is beating unthinkable odds to make his return. And now that he's back, he's ready to take on two of the biggest threats to the Jujutsu world. But before we look at Gojo hunting down Kenjaku and Sukuna, we need to look at how he got unsealed in the first place. Now that Hana's been healed by Shoko, the Satoru Gojo unboxing event can finally begin, since Angel made a deal with Megumi and Yuji to unseal Gojo if they help her take down Sukuna. Back in chapter 199, Angel told Megumi and Yuji that she would only agree to unseal Satoru Gojo if they helped her get rid of the Fallen, because in Angel's eyes, incarnated players wiping out their vessels was against the laws of God, with Sukuna being the worst of the worst. After Sukuna took over Megumi's body in chapter 212, he was too strong for Angel to purge with Jacob's ladder, and Sukuna almost killed Angel and Hana. Even though Sukuna lived and Hana and Angel were almost killed, they were rescued by Amai and healed by Shoko in chapter 220, meaning that regardless of the fact that Angel wasn't able to take out Sukuna, as she said in chapter 220, she will still unseal Gojo, and that will be where her role ends. And with Choso having brought the back of Prison Realm to Yuji from his time with Tengen, the time to unseal Satoru Gojo is finally here. But even though Angel agreed to unseal Satoru Gojo, she isn't ready just yet, asking Yuji and Takaba if they plan on unsealing Gojo in such a small area. Yuji starts to question why he shouldn't, since he's ready to unseal Gojo right now. But Angel points out that time doesn't flow inside of Prison Realm, and whoever's trapped inside won't die of starvation or old age. The person that gets trapped inside of Prison Realm will live indefinitely as long as they don't end their own life. While Hikari questions if you could use Prison Realm as a time machine, it isn't quite the way that he thinks. But even though Angel agreed to unseal Satoru Gojo, because there's no concept of time inside of Prison Realm, it's impossible for Angel and the others to know how Gojo perceived the last 19 days, meaning that from the time that Gojo was sealed in Shibuya, he may have felt like he's been waiting for the last 100 years. Gojo pointed out himself when he was first sealed that time doesn't pass in Prison Realm back in chapter 91, and when Gojo learned that Jujutsu's higher-ups made a plot to kill Yuji in chapter 10, his first instinct was that he wanted to murder all of them in cold blood. With Gojo's mental state being in question, if he's unleashed and goes into a frenzy, he could be a danger to everyone around him. And with Gojo being the strongest of the current generation, Yuji and the others wouldn't be able to stop him in time to survive, leading to everyone that wants to unseal Gojo to have to make a major decision. Jujutsu Kaisen's theme revolves around choices and taking the risk that you need to get where you want to go. Something that Gojo always taught his students was that if they don't take risk, they'll never get the best results. This is best illustrated in chapter 58, where Gojo tells Megumi that because of his mentality, he doesn't know how to bring out his best. Megumi choosing the bunt instead of going for the home run was limiting his own potential. Gojo tells Megumi that no matter how many allies he surrounds himself with, he will always die alone, meaning that as a Jujutsu sorcerer, you have to play for yourself and go for the biggest outcome, while also telling Megumi that his inability to picture a stronger version of himself and underestimating his own strength would limit him from reaching the level of Gojo and even reaching the Nami. Yuji and the others have to take the risk of unsealing Gojo even when it could cost them their lives, because it has the potential to give them a way to beat Kenjaku and Sukuna, perfectly illustrating Gojo's words to Megumi that winning by dying and dying to win are completely different things. With that, everyone goes outside to unseal Prison Realm, hiding behind sandbags just in case everything goes wrong. As Angel flies into the air, Inumaki stands by to give her the command to use her curse technique, Jacob's Ladder. Back when Angel tried to erase Sukuna from Megumi in chapter 213, this is the same curse technique that she used to try to purge Sukuna from the world. Jacob's Ladder refers to an optical phenomenon made by particles of haze or dust in the sky, and is known in many cultures by different names, such as crepuscular rays, Angel's Ladder, the Finger of God, or Buddha's rays, where in Christianity, it refers to a dream that Jacob had of seeing angels ascending and descending a ladder to heaven. Angel going high into the sky to use her curse technique that beams light down onto her target is an exact reference of these two concepts coming together. Hana and Angel aim Jacob's Ladder at Prison Realm to erase the seal. As Angel said back in chapter 199, 99, as long as the seal of Prison Realm is a cursed object, then getting rid of it with her curse technique is no problem. As when it comes to her curse technique, Jacob's Ladder will nullify curse techniques, and seals and barriers are no exception, with Angel's curse technique blasting a beam of light straight on the Prison Realm below. With that, the decision is made. As Angel uses Jacob's Ladder, everyone hides in the background, because as we saw in Chapter 213, Jacob's Ladder hits a wide area and can extinguish its targets. Back in Chapter 199, Angel pointed out that her main goal was to wipe out the incarnated players, since them getting rid of their vessel's consciousness was against the laws of God. So with Angel believing that her curse technique can completely erase her targets, standing anywhere near Jacob's Ladder could be a disaster for Yuji and the others. The decision that's been made was clear. Now that Angel's unsealed Prison Realm, there's no going back. But something happened that no one expected. Prison Realm has disappeared, and Gojo is nowhere to be found. Right when Hana and Angel are about to attempt to explain themselves, an earthquake happens around them. Satoru Gojo is alive. After Kenjaku captured Tengen in Chapter 208, he learned about the back of Prison Realm that Tengen had been hiding from him for the last 1,000 years. So after he sealed Gojo, he placed Prison Realm at the subduction zone, 8,000 meters below the surface in the Japan Trench. When climbing a mountain, 8,000 meters above sea level is commonly referred to as the Death Zone, a level where hardly anyone can survive for more than a few days, with Akutami possibly using this as a reference when placing Gojo 8,000 meters below the ocean's surface. For every 10 meters below sea level, 1 atmosphere of pressure is created, or 14.6 pounds of pressure. With Gojo being put 8,000 meters below sea level, the moment he was released from Prison Realm, his body was meant to be crushed by 11,680 pounds of force, with Kenjaku placing cursed spirits and layers of seals on top of Prison Realm's location to ensure that he wouldn't survive, openly stating that in case the seal had been broken, Gojo would have perished alongside it. All of this was to avoid fighting Satoru Gojo himself, as when he seals Gojo in Chapter 90, in his own words, for Kenjaku, Gojo was too strong, and that they would meet again in the new world. Yet none of this was enough to beat the strongest of the current generation. But if Kenjaku went through all of this to kill Gojo, how did he survive? Well, looking all the way back to the beginning of the Culling Games is where we find our answer. Going back to Chapter 172, we land on Megumi's fight with Reggie Star, where inside of Megumi's domain, his curse technique is pushed to 120% of its potential, causing his 10 shadows to recreate the weight of his Max Elephant more realistically. Using this, Megumi sent Max Elephant from the top of his domain to crush Reggie Star from above. At the exact same time, Reggie placed 3 passenger vehicles inside of Megumi's shadow, forcing him to hold up the weight of 2,400 pounds, while Reggie holds up anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000, as that's the weight of a fully grown African elephant. Yet even with both of them being injured, they were still able to bear thousands of pounds of weight at one time. With Satoru Gojo being the strongest of the current generation, he would be far stronger than Megumi and Reggie combined, meaning that the 11,680 pounds of force that Kenjaku planned to use to kill him wasn't nearly enough. And with Gojo being stronger than Kenjaku, none of the seals that Kenjaku made were enough to hold Gojo back. Kenjaku made a fatal mistake in underestimating how strong Gojo really was, making it so that as soon as Gojo was free from Prison Realm, he broke out of all of Kenjaku's seals and hunted him down effortlessly, on top of somehow resisting being erased from existence. That gets pointed out in the chapter directly, with Kenjaku also saying that Gojo should have perished alongside Prison Realm had he been unsealed. After 1,185 days, Satoru Gojo is completely unsealed and completely unfazed. The passage of time in Prison Realm wasn't enough to break him down, and the first thing that he does when he's free is go straight after Kenjaku, as Kenjaku questions how Gojo even survived in the first place. And even after all of Kenjaku's attempts to make sure Gojo died failed, he tries to mock Gojo by asking him how his time was relaxing in Prison Realm, with Gojo telling Kenjaku to choose his words carefully since they'll be his last. Even though Gojo has been sealed for all this time, his goals haven't changed. Getting rid of Kenjaku must be done at all cost. But as soon as Gojo attacks Kenjaku, someone jumps into their fight. Sukuna has shown up to fight Gojo to rescue Kenjaku, as Kenjaku looks relieved that he doesn't have to fight Gojo, as in his own words when he sealed him in Chapter 90, Gojo is too strong. Kenjaku and Sukuna have known each other for the last 1,000 years, as pointed out by Yuki and Tengen in chapter 145, and they've been working together much more as of recently in the Culling games, with Kenjaku assisting Sukuna with preparing his ritual to take over Megami's body. Not only has Sukuna already expressed an interest in fighting Gojo all the way back in chapter 3, keeping Kenjaku alive also works well for Sukuna as the two of them have their own plans. Back when Gojo was sealed in Shibuya, he chose to put his faith in the next generation to handle what came next. But while he was away, things have gone horribly wrong. Megami was taken over by Sukuna, with Gojo looking directly at Sukuna saying that Megami has changed since the last time he saw him. Back when Gojo killed Toji in chapter 75, Toji told Gojo in 2 or 3 years Megami would be sold off to the Zenin clan and to do with him as he pleased. So Gojo decided to find Megami and take him in as his own. When Gojo found Megami and his sister Sumiki, they were on the verge of becoming homeless, as the money that their step-parents left for them when they abandoned them was about to run out. And Gojo took Megami under his wing to train him as a sorcerer, telling Megami that he better get strong and to not fall behind. Since then, Gojo has watched over Megami to watch him become a strong sorcerer in his own right, with Megami being closer to being Gojo's adopted son rather than just his student. Yet now he's been taken over by Sukuna and has hit rock bottom. At the same time, Sukuna is ready to make good on the threat that he made to Gojo in chapter 3. Asking Gojo if he still remembers. In chapter 3, Sukuna told Gojo that when he makes Yuji's body his, Gojo will be the first one that he kills. Now the body that Sukuna has control over is Megami's instead of Yuji's, but Sukuna's goal remains the same, to kill Gojo with his own hands. Back when Sukuna threatened to kill Gojo, he was doing so with the thought in mind that all he would have were his original powers, as he didn't take an interest in Megami until chapter 9. Now that he has the 10 Shadows and Maharaga, he's an even bigger threat than he was before. Everything that Gojo knew before he was sealed has changed, with the entire world around him now being completely different. Yet Gojo's confidence in beating Sukuna remains exactly the same, where Gojo even mocks Sukuna for challenging him to begin with, saying that someone who ran away from Yuji coming to face him is pathetic. Gojo doesn't even think Sukuna should be talking right now. Back in chapter 3, when Sukuna challenged Gojo, his first words were that being targeted by the great Ryoman Sukuna was an honor, going into an entire backstory to Yuji about Sukuna's past. Yet now he's laughing at Sukuna for running away from Yuji in a fight. But there is something to point out here. When Gojo was sealed in chapter 90, he mentioned that he couldn't use his cursed energy, and that inside of Prison Realm, he was in a void where time didn't pass, with Kenjaku burying Prison Realm in the sea, and the back half of Prison Realm being kept secret by Tengen and held by Choso until Gojo was unsealed. Gojo hasn't spoken to Yuji or anyone else from Tokyo and Kyoto since he's been unsealed, so the only way that he would know anything about what happened between Sukuna and Yuji is if he could somehow hear what Yuji and the others were talking about before he was unsealed, even though he was trapped in another dimension. Otherwise, him knowing about Sukuna and Yuji's fight without speaking to any of them wouldn't make any sense, meaning that Gojo may know far more about Kenjaku and Sukuna than he's letting on. Jujutsu Kaisen is a series that once again hammers home the theme of choices. When Gojo starts laughing at Sukuna for running away from Yuji, Uraume can't contain herself, getting angry and calling him swine, since being Sukuna's assistant for the last 1,000 years has clearly caused Uraume to grow attached to him. But Uraume forgot that she was insulting the strongest man on the planet, and Gojo launches her with one punch and knocks her unconscious. As Uraume's blood flies out of her mouth, it doesn't even touch Gojo's face because of his infinity. This is the same level of detail that was applied to Gojo's fight with Jogo, where because of his curse technique, Jogo's blood didn't even touch his body, with Gojo even questioning who Uraume even was in the first place. The choice to go against Gojo had failed. Before Sukuna and Gojo start fighting again, Kenjaku interrupts them and tells Sukuna to wait, as he still has a promise to Kenjaku that needs to be fulfilled. Going back to chapter 220, the reason that sorcerers from the past agreed to Kenjaku's offer to become cursed objects was because they didn't know how to do it themselves. But Sukuna was the only sorcerer from the past who was able to split his soul by himself. But through Kenjaku's actions of possessing Kayori Itadori and creating Sukuna's vessel through Yuji, it becomes clear that Sukuna wasn't wasn't able to secure a vessel through his own actions. As Megumi pointed out in Chapter 1, the chances of surviving when ingesting a special grade cursed object are 1 in a million, due to them being a lethal poison. And with Kenjaku's main objective being to merge Japan with Tengen, entering a binding vow with Sukuna to help him complete Tengen's merger in exchange for making him a suitable vessel could be the key to Kenjaku's plan, giving Sukuna no way to go against the vow that he made with Kenjaku, as the punishments for breaking binding vows is unknown. So Sukuna has to keep working with Kenjaku until their binding vow is complete. After making more fun of Sukuna and Kenjaku, Gojo realizes that he may have acted too quickly in hunting them down, since he still has some things to take care of before fighting Sukuna. And one of his main objectives with killing Kenjaku is to give Suguru's body a proper burial. This makes sense as Gojo and Suguru were close friends when they were younger. When Suguru went rogue in Chapter 77, Gojo was devastated at what happened, demanding that Suguru explain himself for killing 100 civilians and becoming a rogue curse user. And when Suguru waged war on all of Japan in Volume 0, Gojo had to kill Suguru with his own hands, after Suguru's fight with Yuta Kotsu. Once Gojo finally ran into Kenjaku, once he was sealed in Chapter 91, one of the biggest things that Gojo mentioned is how he didn't like Kenjaku using Suguru's body, which made the small shred of Suguru that still existed respond from within, by trying to take down Kenjaku with the last pieces of him that he still had. These other things that Gojo has to do before fighting Sukuna can also be referring to taking out the higher-ups like Principal Gakuganji for killing Principal Yaga in Chapter 147, plotting to have Yuji executed a second time, and branding anyone that aided in his release as a criminal in Chapter 137. Even with all of these possibilities, laying his friend to rest is one of Gojo's biggest priorities. With both Gojo and Sukuna having things that they need to handle, Gojo offers to reschedule the fight to December 24th, the date of Suguru's death. Back in Volume 0, when Suguru unleashed the Night Parade of 100 Demons, he announced that he was going to attack all of Japan on December 24th. This would also be the day that Suguru was beaten by Yuta Kotsu, and Gojo would kill Suguru himself. With Kenjaku having Suguru's memories after taking over his body that he pointed out in Chapter 90 when referencing Suguru's past knowledge on his fight with Yuta, he mentions that having a fight date set with Gojo on the 24th is creepy, to which Gojo replies that Suguru having 2 death dates would be complicated. With the current date in the series being November 19th, that gives Gojo, Sukuna, and Kenjaku 5 weeks to prepare, with Yuta, Yuji, and Maki deciding what colonies they would go to back in Chapter 146, and the Culling Games spanning all the way to Chapter 220 having only been 19 days. Without a time skip, 5 weeks will be a significant amount of time. And with everyone having preparations to make, this seems like the best option all around. Meanwhile, Sukuna is completely fine with the entire idea, as the words of Yorozu entered his head, about understanding that absolute strength comes with solitude. In Sukuna's past in Chapter 219, Yorozu pointed out that because of Sukuna's journey to unrivaled strength, he was filled with loneliness, saying that his solitude is something that she wanted all to herself. Coincidentally, Naoya also had the same reaction when he saw Toji, seeing Toji's eyes and realizing that Toji had achieved ultimate strength, saying that no one could possibly understand Toji because of them not being at the same level, with the only one that could possibly understand that being Gojo himself. With Sukuna being at the top of the Heian era and having reached the ultimate level of strength, he probably realized that Gojo is the one person that can offer him what he wants the most: a fight with someone who understands what it's like to be at that level. At the same time, Kenjaku looks nervous at Gojo's confidence, as he's probably starting to realize by now that his lack of knowledge is working against him. Had he known about the back of Prison Realm that Tengen was hiding from him for the last 1,000 years, he would have been far better prepared for his plans to work. But because he only found out about the back of Prison Realm after taking in Tengen as a curse, this lack of info is causing his plans to blow up in his face, as all the effort that he went through to avoid fighting Gojo to begin with has only ended in that exact thing happening, with Gojo being more determined than ever to take down Kenjaku regardless of what he has to do to get that done, having absolutely no fear when dealing with both Sukuna and Kenjaku. As far as he's concerned, Gojo is ready for everything that they can throw his way. One of the biggest fights that Jujutsu Kaisen will ever have is set to happen in the future. However, even with Gojo being unsealed, we can't forget that Gege Akutami is still working towards a tragic ending, as he plans to either kill one person from Gojo's group or kill everyone except one person. And with Kenjaku already planning on killing everyone except himself and Sukuna, his main priority will be completing Tengen's merger as soon as possible, to make his cursed spirit with the strength of 100 million people and potentially cause the end of the world, and create something that may even be able to beat Gojo himself. With Sukuna having killed Yorozu, he also killed Tsumiki, destroying Megami and sending his soul to its absolute lowest, making the mission to save Megami that much more difficult. But in chapter 220, Yuji pointed out that he would eat anything to beat Sukuna, after Shoko mentioned he was now like a cursed object that was soaked in Sukuna's cursed energy, where Yuji later tells Choso that he's sorry about their siblings, with Choso responding that it's fine as long as they continue to live inside of Yuji. What this means is that not only does Yuji have the potential to unlock Dismantle and Cleave the way that Gojo said he would during their training, but it also heavily implies that he ate the other cursed wombs, and will get a massive power-up before fighting Kenjaku and Sukuna. And with all of the sorcerers coming together for the final fight, Jujutsu Kaisen is set up for one of the biggest finales it could possibly have. Additionally, now that Yuta will learn about Gojo's plans to take on Sukuna and Kenjaku, he will have to make a major decision, since in chapter 174, Yuta points out that he doesn't want Gojo to have to kill his best friend a second time, and that because of that, he plans to kill Kenjaku himself. Yet Gojo is fully willing to kill Kenjaku again. All of this is leading to a way to take Kenjaku and Sukuna down, as all of the gathered sorcerers and Gojo can create a plan to attack them at one time, with the clashes of all of their stories finally coming to an end. With Gojo wanting to take down Sukuna and Kenjaku, Yuji wanting to rescue Megami, and Kenjaku wanting to start Tengen's merger, at least one of these characters is set to experience a major loss, as Principal Yaga pointed out in chapter 3 that no sorcerer ever dies without regrets. And with Gege Akutami's planned ending of either one person in Gojo's group dying or all of them dying except for one person, the amount of things that Yuji will have to do to fulfill his plan of saving Megami is getting crazier and crazier. Now that Yuji is fully ready to take down Sukuna at all costs, and Gojo is ready to do the same, Yuji, Megami, and Gojo will all be faced with the decisions that they made at the beginning of Jujutsu Kaisen, with Yuji swallowing Sukuna's finger, Megami choosing to save Yuji, and Gojo deciding to do the same. And if you want to hear even more about how Gojo and Sukuna can turn out, make sure to check out Full Power Sukuna vs. Gojo on the screen right now.